There is a scripture that I want you to make sure that you hear as well as read, and that scripture is Proverbs chapter 22, and the verse is number 7. Proverbs chapter 22, and the verse is 7. Allow me to read this verse and then share a real life story with you that will help you to appreciate the importance of this verse. Proverbs 22, verse 7 says, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender." As I have mentioned to you before, I have a professional background that includes working at a college in the financial aid department and also as a senior scholarship advisor. Allow me to tell you two stories about two real students whose names will be modified to protect those who have not given their consent to share this information. The first student, I will call him Mr. Freeman. The second, I'll call Miss Bag Lady. When these two individuals graduated, I asked Mr. Freeman what he was going to do in terms of a job. And he shared with me that he was not getting ready to get a job right away, that he was going hiking for about 6 months and explore the countryside and do some things. And in 6 months or so, then he would decide to get a job. And I asked him what he was going to do about student loans and taking care of himself, and he informed me that preparations had been made by his grandfather and things had been put in order where he never had to take out a student loan and was able to have a trust fund and had a secure financial future. Miss Bag Lady, on the other hand, was quite eager to find employment because she was carrying around bags of debt, student loan debt on top of student loan debt. If the government had a student loan, she took it out to help subsidize her education. And I thought how ironic that two people graduating in the same class have such a different reality and outlook on life based on one simple factor: their financial standing. It was Thomas Jefferson who said, "I believe banking institutions pose a greater threat to our liberties than standing armies." Someone else anonymously said, "By giving our bond, we enter into bondage." Beloved, we need to address within the realm of sensibility the racial inequities and the racial wealth gap. But we must come to understand that all of this is not the result of systemic issues or even race issues. We have to look at the fact that where there is fruit, there is a root. And so the root of some of our issues needs to be addressed. For example, black land ownership has decreased in the last 100 years. Blacks own less land today than during the civil rights era. Blacks own fewer homes today than they did 50 years ago. The Brookings Institute notes that we have a lack of inheritance of money being passed from one generation to the next. Interestingly, blacks are more likely to take out life insurance than whites, but we view life insurance from the standpoint of burial cost and final expenses. And so, on average, our life insurance policies are about $50,000, whereas for whites it's $150,000. As mentioned from the example I gave you from my own real life experience working with college students, we have less in college funds but we are disproportionately representing those who have student loan debt. If we consider scholarships, we rely more on sports scholarships than we do academic scholarships. We need to break some of these cycles. It is not sensible that a kid is wearing $150 gym shoes and has no college fund. It is not sensible that we spend more money on video games and things of that nature, and yet we rely on debt to finance lifestyles. One of the challenges in breaking the cycles is to understand what our hindrances are in addressing this. For some, they're not even aware that there is a problem. For others, there is a sense of entitlement that somebody owes them something. Another reason that people do not break this cycle is because they don't know how. Other reasons is that people can become comfortable with dysfunction, and those norms, as they are to them, are norms that they're just comfortable with. And then some people lack the courage to admit their financial failures. They lack the courage to do something radically different. Beloved, we've got to do better. We can do better. And the church must do more than liberate souls from sin. We must recognize that those souls who have been liberated are still saddled with the oppression of debt. So how can we move beyond this? Number one, we need to examine our outcomes. And whatever outcomes we see that we don't like, we need to examine the habits that contribute to those outcomes. Second, we need to develop goals and seek resources to help make those goals a reality. Some people have no sense of where they are financially and no sense of where they are headed. We need to make sure that we are buying stocks and not buying Nike Air Jordan gym shoes. Why is it our children are wearing expensive gym shoes and clothing, not just from Nike, but other companies, which do not have adequate representation of people who look like them, and yet they don't even own stock in those companies in which they are underrepresented? Why is it that gym shoe companies spend more in endorsements to black athletes than they do to white athletes? Is it because we're more likely to buy into the propaganda than those who do not look like us? We need to encourage our children and young grandchildren to have savings accounts and maybe even do a match to encourage their savings. Why do we spend so much money on clothing and toys, video games? Why not teach them how to save money? Create a college savings plan. There are online training tools that can help you to learn financial skills, that can tutor and help to develop greater financial habits. All of this is to say that all of our problems are not racial or systemic. There are some things that are the result of us needing to change our minds on how we approach things. We need to create a better outcome and a better generational reality for our children and grandchildren so that they can enjoy liberties and be like Mr. Freeman and find himself, go hiking, do whatever he wants to do, as opposed to being like Miss Bag Lady and being saddled with debt. There is a certain freedom you have when you're not oppressed in any form, including oppression to a debtor. And haven't you noticed that they do not usually call them debtors anymore because of the negative stigma? So they call them creditors. But who's really a credit is something that is to the benefit of the one that the credit is assigned. When you take out debt, you're not really benefiting. So is that really your creditor? Is that really someone who's helping you? Or is that a debtor? Again, I say we've got to do better, and we can do better. This has been a few minutes with the minister. Hope that this has been an investment in your time and an investment that will pay dividends as you seek to do better, if you need to do better, for the better of your posterity.